You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erica Washington.
Podcasting has been an adventure for all of us. Putting together each episode, painstakingly editing and curating guests that we know that you would love has been a dream come true. But do you hear that sound? That's the sound of us rummaging around through the couch cushions, looking through last year's coat pockets and through the piggy banks, pulling out those last dimes, trying to make it work. So we need your help. If you've got some extra dollars hanging around or you're just looking to give, please go to makeitworknevada.org and click the donate button. Every little bit helps us to produce more content as well as outreach for the community. Again, makeitworknevada.org, click the donate button, and thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erica Washington. Hey there, Sticky Note listeners. This is your host, Erica Washington. And as we continue in our replay era, I thought it would be a great time to run back a conversation that we had with Nevada Attorney General Aron Ford. If you remember, he sat down for a Sticky Note conversation with us a few months ago. We talked about his work in the Attorney General's office, his plans for Nevada, as well as the many lawsuits that he's had to bring against the Trump administration. And speaking of that, I thought it was a great time because for the first time in history, SNAP benefits, sometimes known as food stamps, are suspended by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so Nevada Attorney General Ford has joined a coalition of states, including Maryland, Kansas, Hawaii, Michigan, New Mexico, Wisconsin, Arizona, North Carolina, and many, many more against the federal government, and specifically against the Trump administration, to use a $5 billion contingency to help pay for SNAP. And you may not know, 41 million Americans and 495,000 Nevadans rely on these benefits to eat. And no matter where you stand, purposely starving our neighbors is not a part of the American dream. We hope to have more shows coming soon. And I really hope to have some conversations about the current government shutdown, both the current and after effects, the ripple effects that this shutdown is going to bring on all of us. In the meantime, please enjoy this replay conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did.
Way below acceptable. Way below acceptable.
On this week's episode,
I had a baby in college and had to get on welfare. And thank goodness that it was there because it helped me. And now I got 3 sons and a nephew who are active social agents in society who are contributing members. This is the American dream.
Way below acceptable.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sticky Note Conversations. I am your host, Erica Washington, the Executive Director of Make It Work Nevada. And I am going to have a really great conversation today with someone that hopefully you know, but if not, this is a great opportunity for you to get to know our Attorney General. Nevada State Attorney General Aron Ford is joining us for a Sticky Note conversation, and I think everyone will enjoy it. Welcome, Attorney General Aron Ford, to Sticky Note Conversations.
Happy to be here. Good to see you, Erica.
Good to see you too. It's been a while. It's really been a while, I think, since we've seen each other in person, but I know you're always out there doing all of the fun stuff, all of the hard work, and a little fraternity line dancing too. Is that what they call it? It's not called a line dance. Is it called a line?
Fraternity line dance, girl. It's called caning.
Oh, caning.
Yeah, I know how to cane.
Right.
It's old school caning, but I still got it.
Well, I am glad. And that video, I can't remember whatever that fad was for a second, the social media fad where all of you were doing it, you and former Commissioner Lawrence Weekly and everybody. It came up on my timeline not too long ago. It was so funny. Yeah, like it just randomly gets shared.
Don't Rush Challenge. That's what it was.
That's what it was. Yep. The Don't Rush Challenge. So how is it? How are things going in the Attorney General's office?
Great. Look, I'm living and loving life. God's been good. That's really the sum and substance of it all. I love my job. I got 4 of them right now, and we'll get into that. I got 4 jobs in my mind, but the job is great. Family is fantastic. My wife's doing great work over at Nevada State University, general counsel over there. My kids are fabulous. I have my oldest is a doctor now.
You got a doctor in the family
He
now.
graduated Georgetown last May. He's doing his residency in emergency medicine. My middle son's a first-year law student at my alma mater, the Ohio State University, doing great. Got some good summer jobs lined up for himself. And then my youngest boy's a sophomore in biochemistry major, also has a good summer job lined up. So honestly, God is good. I can't complain at all. Life's great. We are, living a high life, so to speak. And, and at work, it's a lot. I got the day job of being the top lawyer for the state and the top law enforcement officer for the state. Then I got my legislative job. We have 16, 17 bills we're running in the legislature. So I'm up in Carson City during the week trying to get my bills heard and passed. We have what's called the federal accountability work that we do that is essentially us engaging with what the federal government is trying to do under the current administration. And obviously, I'm running for governor. So we're going to be gearing up for that, working hard in the building block stage in that regard. But it's a lot going on right now.
A little bit. Your to-do list seems like it might be just a tad bit longer than the average person. Let me start with family, because I always think that is the cornerstone to anything, that none of us can do the jobs that we have without the support of our families, but especially folks who are in elected office. You have raised 3 young men, three Black young men, and they're all ascending to these great heights. What is it like now being an empty nester, and how are you parenting from afar?
Well, actually, we always said we raised 4 sons, 3 sons and my nephew. But Erica, you met my nephew, Devin, back in the day. He's between my oldest son and my middle son. He's also doing great in his own right. He's down in Texas, working hard, being a productive member of society, which is fantastic. And, it's a blessing. As I indicated, God's been good to us. It's been fascinating and really unbelievable to watch the years go by. When I first ran for office in 2010, I had 4 kids at every level of school: kindergartner, 5th grade, 8th grade, and a senior in high school. And now they're all out of the house. And my wife ain't kicked me out the house yet, so she's still like me. That's great. Empty nesting has been good so far. It's been 2 years, and I sleep in my same bed, so that's great, right? But parenting from afar, it doesn't stop. They left my house, but they've not left my heart. And at least once a week, I just send a quick little text message, just saying, checking on your son, how you doing? And they don't just say, okay, which is great. That's how it used to be, right? I'm fine, or whatever. They give me a nice summary of what's going on in their lives, and which is great because they're all over the place. None of my kids are here, and they're all, one's in Ohio, one's in Florida, one's in Arizona, and Devin's down in Texas. And so, my joy has been to watch them develop into young men. I've always said I was raising 4 Black boys to become 4 Black men, and they are doing great.
And that's amazing. I think as someone who raised 3 Black young women now who are all over the place, it is it's a surreal sort of experience to see them figuring things out in life and making decisions, and sometimes asking for advice, sometimes not asking for advice. Sometimes I'm giving it whether they want it or not. Right. They've grown into really interesting people. And I've told them, I said, I'd hang out with you even if you weren't my kid. I'm maybe a little biased, but also I think you're just interesting people. And I think that is also just being productive is great, but also raising people who can make decisions and think things through, have critical thinking skills. I think that's the win.
No, 100%. And like I said, my boys are doing great academically. They are also, they've done great academically. And now we're working at what the profession is going to be. They're all my frat brothers, too, which is fantastic. They all pledged Kappa Alpha Psi. They all pretty, but get that from their mama and their daddy. What can I say? And so it's great. Hanging out with them, talking to them, watching them, and just being grateful that God's blessed them so much.
So speaking of pledging, it just dawned on me that there, was an incident recently of a young man who lost his life pledging for a fraternity. What has that conversation been like within your circles of your frat brothers, of what's happening now versus what happened back when you pledged? And how can parents who have children who are graduating from high school this year, who are thinking about going to college and pledging, what would you say to them?
Yeah, look, it's been obviously a topic of conversation among my fraternity brothers and I. We're in several different chats, both from our undergrad institution, but also locally here in Las Vegas and with my sons, right? And it's been an ongoing problem. When I pledged in 1993, it was a few years after where they supposedly banned underground pledging. And then a year after I pledged in 1994, my fraternity was on the media because one of our pledges was killed in Southeast Missouri, right? And it was 1994. So, it's something that's been going on for a long time, obviously way too long. And I told my sons in the chat, point blank, people need to keep their hands to themselves. Just old school information, old school lessons. Keep your hands to yourself. It's all fun and games, from the aggressor side until someone gets hurt. And then you might find yourself in prison. It's not something that I countenance or anything that I suggest or support. And it's revived the conversation. And I'm glad that it's being had again in a sense that it needs to be addressed. I am dismayed that it is happening again because someone has lost their life. And we need to be rectifying the situation going forward.
As someone who has been a part of a fraternity for so long, or I guess you would be considered an elder in that sense, or old head, is there leadership that way for the younger recruits, the newer folks who have just made it into the fraternities, to talk to them, to help give them guidance on what to do and what not to do?
Look, when I was a neophyte, neo as we call it, to now as an old head, there's always been some level of friction between the old heads and the neophyte and the young boys. You ain't even got to be a neophyte, just young heads. But sure, there's always conversations around guidance. We have rules and regulations in our fraternity that disallow any type of hazing, right? So it's not as though it's lawful or lawful under our constitution and statutes of our fraternities. It's just a tradition that has withstood time, and there are negative consequences associated with pursuing it.
So let's talk about your job as the Attorney General. For those who may not be aware of what a state Attorney General does, could you give folks just a brief synopsis?
Sure. There are a couple of jobs that I think most folks can understand. As the Attorney General, I am the top legal officer in the state. I'm the lawyer for the state. So on the one hand, I am the lawyer for the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, all of the administrative agencies, whether it's the Department of Education or the Department of Corrections or the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. Those are my clients, and I give them advice. I don't make decisions, to be sure, but I give them legal advice on what to do when we encounter certain circumstances. So that's one part of my job. Another part of my job is to sue on behalf of the state or to defend lawsuits when the state gets sued. I sue people for violating our consumer protection laws. So the opioid companies, for example, manufacturers and distributors, I sued many of them, and I've recovered through my administration over $1.2 billion that will be coming in over the next 20 years to help abate the opioid crisis. And we sued them because they fraudulently misled folks and got folks hooked at the end of the day, and it's caused damage to the state. So that's part of what I do, is defend lawsuits and pursue lawsuits. I also have the title of the top law enforcement officer in the state, where we have some criminal jurisdiction. Predominantly, my criminal jurisdiction, violent crimes, arises when the crime occurs in our prisons. For example, we prosecute people for violating the law while they're in prison. We also prosecute state actors. People work for the state when they violate some of the laws. We work in elder abuse. We have some child abuse related jurisdiction as well, insurance fraud, Medicaid fraud, and a few other things. And those are a few of the things that I do. And I mentioned federal accountability early on. That's another part of my job relative to lawsuits, ensuring that the state retains its sovereignty and defends itself from what we call federal overreach. And so sometimes I have to engage in lawsuits against the federal government when they are violating the Constitution or stepping on our sovereignty. And that's part of the job as well.
So specifically, right now, it feels like, from what we're seeing on the news, is that there are so many things that you and other attorney generals are a part of in protections, and including things that are happening within the federal government. And so specifically, I know that there are some protections around Medicaid for Medicaid recipients that could go away with some of the, and I'm dancing around my words here because I'm trying to be nice a little bit, but statutes, or I'm not even sure what the word is there, of things that the current President Trump is trying to put into place or calling to put into place, including limiting Medicaid, is something that I know that there's a lawsuit against. Can you talk a little bit about that lawsuit and what that means for the residents of Nevada and I guess the rest of the country as well?
Let me speak a little more broadly, because there's not my office is not engaged in a specific lawsuit against Medicaid or about Medicaid. It's involved in lawsuits. One of the very first ones we got involved in was when the federal government said that they wanted to put a stop to trillions of dollars of federal funds from going to funding recipients, which includes our state. And Medicaid comes into play there, but it also comes into play. It also came into play relative to the budgeting issue going on, the debate going on in the federal government. You see me speak on Medicaid when I said that the federal government's budget would potentially affect over 300,000 Nevadans if Medicaid got cut. And the federal budget, the federal funding freeze would have affected our budget because a third of our budget comes from the federal government. Right. And so we did sue on the broader context of federal funding, the freeze itself. And we have prevailed temporarily, at least, on that, and saying that the president couldn't do it. It was unlawful. And let me back up. It's important for folks to understand my position on the federal accountability stuff that we do. I'm not an election denier. Mr. President, Donald Trump won the presidency. And I said this back in November. He won. He was to be our president. He is now our president. And to the victor goes the spoils. He has the right as president to implement policies and procedures and things of that sort that he ran on and wants to implement. I have no problem with that. But he must do so lawfully. And what I have said is when he breaks the law, I will meet him in court. And so far, we've met him in court and we've beat him in court every single time, because he is violating the law. A lot of things that he wants to do, he can do if he follows the rules and the law, but he's not. And that speaks specifically to the federal funding freeze component, where he was violating the law to try to freeze money that Congress had already allocated to go to certain places and to people and to entities. And he can't do that. He doesn't have the right to do it, which is why we prevailed in that regard. The Medicaid issue, as I've indicated, is a specific one. And as someone who was a single parent early in my 20s, I was on Medicaid, and so was my son. We relied on Medicaid to take care of our health, and thank goodness for Medicaid being available to a single father and his son when I was on Section 8 housing and on food stamps, but because it helped not just me ultimately graduate from college and go on to get 5 more degrees. It helped the next generation of the Fords. It helped my oldest son. And we share a hashtag now where it is from Medicaid to medical doctor. And so I have a vested interest in seeing it move forward and understand the importance of it, which is why I speak up on those types of issues.
Is this the same as with the education department, the lawsuit with the education department?
It's similar. So we filed a lawsuit. We, as in the Democratic Attorneys General, and I have come together as a coalition to sue on most of these things. But on the Department of Education in particular, the president endeavored to essentially shut it down, but laying off folks. And what we have said is he also doesn't have the right to do that, not in the way that he's trying to do it. He can't shutter an entire agency that Congress has created, and he can't stop them from fulfilling their statutory responsibilities in the way that he has done so. And so we sued to stop it. And we have prevailed temporarily in that regard as well. The education issue is important for us because, a lot of, disabled students get federal funds. Student loans, the portal went down the day after he called himself cutting off the Department of Education. So it affects us here in a way that is very real. And that's why we were able to stand up for Nevadans and prevail in a lawsuit to stop him from trying to shut down the Department of Education in the way that he did it.
The thing that I've been trying to figure out is that, and you said that he can do a lot of things as the president, he just can't do illegal things.
Right.
Now, I am not a person who thinks that this particular president is dumb or stupid. I don't think that he is. I think that things are done very intentionally. They just may seem like, tomfoolery or what have you to some folks. And it's just done very differently than what people have been used to with even just lines of decorum. So looking at it through that lens of this person knows what he's doing, or he has people around him who understands the law and understands what is possible and what is not possible. And yet these things keep happening. Like, what do you think the reasoning is? Is it a distraction from something else? Or if we have these folks who are all in office who seem to know the law as well, why are they pushing this envelope in this way if they're going to lose?
Look, I'm loath to ascribe a motivation to the president. In fact, I gave up a long time ago on describing motivations to the president for some of the actions that he takes, with the exception of one opinion that I have, and that is he doesn't care about the law. He thinks the law doesn't apply to him. And to the extent it does apply, he's going to try to press and test the bounds of the law in every action that he takes. And he surrounded himself with folks who are, in my estimation, yes men and yes women who tell him no. And then when they tell him no, we've seen what happened during Trump 1, he fires them, right? And he will do whatever he wants to do because he thinks, again, the law doesn't apply to him. But I'm here to say, as are my colleagues on the Democratic Attorney General Association, that we will meet him in court and beat him in court because the rule of law still applies. That didn't change with the election of our new president in his inauguration. And that's why we keep prevailing in court. Again, this isn't a political thing. To be sure, I don't agree with him politically, and there may be some partisan differences, but that's not the basis of my lawsuits. In fact, if the basis of my lawsuits were purely political or partisan, we probably wouldn't have, to this day, 100% success rate in the lawsuits he brought this year, and we wouldn't have had over an 80% success rate during Trump 1.0 when we sued over so many of the things that he did. So, again, aside from him thinking the law doesn't apply to him, I don't ascribe any other motivation because, it doesn't matter. If it violates the law, I'm going to sue, and we're likely to prevail.
When you talk about the Trump administration, another thing that has come up a lot is tariffs and the amount of tariffs that have been assigned to various countries. And then it seems to be this tit for tat going back and forth with like Canada, especially right now. Are you concerned that this is going to possibly cause a recession or anything else?
Well, look, I'll leave the conversation around tariffs and the effects it will have on our economy to the economists and to the federal to the federal government in that regard. But to be sure, I read papers like everybody else. And I watch the news and I'm on social media and I see the reports of what they say the possibilities are, higher prices for everything, recessions and things of that sort. So it does concern me, right? I mean, I'm a Nevadan like everybody else. I have neighbors, I have friends, I have family, not just in Nevada, but all across the nation, to be sure. And, it would appear to me that the pundits' opinions should be given some level of credence. But again, I'll leave it to them to speak more in a more refined way on what tariffs and things of that stuff would do to the economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the lawsuit around with the drug companies around opioid, the opioid crisis, and the amount of money that could be expected to come into Nevada. What would that money be used for, and who will benefit from it? Or is that a decision that is made by the legislature, or how will that work?
That's, there are a couple of answers to that question. Bring in the money, and I put it in a pot that the legislature determined, not the legislature, but a committee that the legislature created back in 2021. Maybe they created it in 19, I forget exactly when. But there's a committee called the Advisory Committee for Resilient Nevada, I think it is. And they advise the Health and Human Services, a DHHS, on how to spend this money. But it has to be spent to abate the opioid crisis. This is different from what happened when we got a lot of money in from the tobacco settlements and how that money wasn't specifically spent on tobacco abatement. It went to other things. It went to the general fund of the legislature, and they used it to build roads or to create the Millennium Scholarship, for example. This opioid money by settlement, but also by court decree, has to be spent on things that relate to abating the opioid crisis. Now, that can be broad. We have foster kids, for example, who are in the system because their parents potentially were affected by the opioid crisis. And so money could be spent ostensibly on the foster care system for those types of issues, but it can be too far astray of what the focus was on this litigation, which was to have monies spent to abate the opioid crisis. It doesn't go to individuals. Let me be clear about that. This isn't money that I don't represent individuals per se. I represent the entire state. And so this money comes in and the state is determining, how it's spent relative to going to organizations or grants or programs that help abate the opioid crisis.
How deeply was Nevada affected by the opioid crisis?
The
We have
third
numbers
hardest
around that?
Yeah, by some estimations, the third hardest hit state per capita in the nation, which is part of the reason why our opioid litigation was a little different than other states. A lot of states went in, and we did on sometimes, what we call multi-state litigation, where we settled or prevailed in a litigation with a company, and we divvied up the money according to a formula that would afford us a certain amount of money versus California versus Wyoming or whatever the case may be. But sometimes I went it alone, where I didn't agree with the multi-state allocation because the money we would have gotten would not have been sufficient for purposes of the harm inflicted on Nevada. So, for example, the very first settlement that we engaged in was one with a consulting company that was for over $500 million for all states except for Nevada. I said I wouldn't engage. I said I would not take $6.5 million, maybe it was $7 million out of $500 million as recompense to the state of Nevada for the harm. I said it was just too little, too low. And so I went it alone, and we ultimately settled a few weeks later for $45 million. And that's the approach I've taken. I represent Nevada, and if I don't think Nevada is getting its fair share, I go alone, and we are able to get more money. The same thing happened with CVS and Walgreens and a few other places as well, where we got multiples of what we would have received had I just gone with a multi-state litigation. And we got that amount of money because I went it alone, and I was unafraid to defend Nevada in the name of Nevada.
It amazes me how much money is involved here for Nevada to receive. You said how much?
$1.2 billion.
$1.2 billion.
Right.
For the state of Nevada. And so that does include all of the other states that have sued in various ways. And yet it hasn't bankrupted the industry.
Well, it's bankrupted some. Purdue Pharma, for example, one of the biggest players in this, is bankrupt, and is bankrupted in the sense that we had to go through the bankruptcy process in order to get money from them. So some are bankrupt, but some are not, to your point.
I wouldn't be surprised if they can come out of it, though. So.
You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erica Washington.
Let me ask you about the Attorney General's office and climate change. Climate change has been something that folks have been talking about for decades now. And a lot of times people are not engaged in what actual issues the climate change is causing in the state. So the state itself, if you talk about Las Vegas, there are these heat islands where things are just hotter in certain parts of the city than others. There's the issue of being concerned that there's never going to be enough water to supply to all of the residents, let alone the tourists. What is the Attorney General's office doing, or how are you all helping to protect Nevadans from the evildoers of those polluting who want to pollute our state or pull our water away?
Yeah, well, we have lanes that we operate in. My lane is a legal lane, not the policy-making lane. That would be the legislature and the governor. So as I've indicated, the administrative agencies are my clients. So the Department of Energy, for example, is my client. So is the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. They're my clients. And so what happens is there are opportunities to engage in litigation against companies that are polluting, violating our rules and regulations related to emissions, for example, or causing problems with our water and things of that sort. And so we engage in litigation frequently, sometimes even multi-state litigation against companies that do those types of misdeeds. And we coordinate or we check with the client, Department of Energy or Department of Conservation and Natural Resources or whatever the particular department would be, to ascertain their interest in some of this. And sometimes they don't want me to get engaged, and they're my client, and so I can get engaged. Sometimes they're agnostic and I make my own decision, and sometimes they absolutely want me to get engaged. And so what we've done is, we sue polluters. We get injunctions to stop them from doing certain things, or orders that require them to do certain things, clean up and things of that sort. We advocate for policies to the federal government by signing comment letters, asking them to enact federal legislation that covers air quality and water quality and things of that sort. So there are different ways we can engage, but it always has to be within the legal lane as opposed to the policymaking lane. And that's how we engage on this particular issue.
And one of the things that during this last election that we were successful in was removing slavery from the Nevada state constitution, which was, I think, a really big deal because there are other states, California, who didn't decide to remove that from their constitution. It was on their ballot as well. So it was something we were able to do. And so now that is done and it is removed. What do you think that can do for those who are incarcerated with that language being removed? How can it change how incarcerated people are treated in prison? How could this change possibly how much they are paid for the work that they are doing? How does it help with actual rehabilitation? What can we hope for or strive for or push for now that language is gone?
Well, that's a good question. And I'm not certain that removing slavery from the Constitution, and to be clear, we should let the audience understand what this means. When the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution was passed, it said that slavery could no longer exist. And there was an exception. The exception said, except for punishment of a crime for which you've been duly convicted, right? And so that exception was used to enact black codes in the South predominantly, where walking on the wrong side of the street could be a crime, for example, and you get arrested and prosecuted and convicted, and now suddenly you're a member of a chain gang doing work for a big corporation that is leasing convicts from prisons. And that was a form of slavery, right? One of the questions is, what are the remnants of that? Because convict leasing has gone by the wayside in many different places, although some would say the fact that those who are in our prisons get paid, cents per hour constitutes some level of slavery for the work that they do. I'm not certain that removing slavery from the Constitution necessarily affects that practice. There have been separate efforts, one that I support as well. I think Dina Neal, and we should pray for her continued recovery, a good friend of ours who is a staunch advocate for the entirety of Nevada. But I believe she tried to run a bill that required those in our prison systems to be paid at least minimum wage and not cents per hour or something like that. And I think those are different efforts that are underway that can help affect some of the conditions in prison. I'm not sure what the real practical import of removing slavery, the exception to slavery from our Constitution will have. I guess that remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about this next phase that you're trying to get to. So you made the announcement that you are running for governor for the state of Nevada, which is very exciting because if you are elected, you would be the first Black governor of the state of Nevada, which I think is a long time coming. Knowing how busy you are and how much work is required of an elected official, I am always in awe that someone raises their hand to do more of it, to dig deeper into the muck and the mud of what politics is and policy and just because there's a lot of ugly inside of it, right? There's a lot of ugly. And you have to have grown really thick skin to be able to do it. But then this is a new level. So why do you want to do that?
Girl, it's a good question. It's interesting, right? But I have a good answer, though. I debated this for a long time. And frankly, the election gave me two sentiments at the exact same time. Or maybe I should say it gave me a sense of clarity and trepidation at the exact same time, simultaneously coexisting in my body. The clarity in my mind after Mr. Trump won was, I got to run for governor, right? Because I know what's going to happen over the next 4 years. And hopefully over the next 2, we can do enough to forestall some of the negative repercussions in our state. But we're going to need someone in the governor's mansion who is dedicated to protecting the entirety of the Nevada family. That clarity came to me almost immediately, as did trepidation, because the clarity was, I got to run for governor. I'm running for governor. The trepidation was, oh boy, I'm running for governor. And there will be a different level of interaction with the community in that regard, a lot more scrutiny to be sure, and a lot more negativity. My races have not been easy, Erica. You've been around. When I first ran for Attorney General, you recall the racist ads that they ran on TV against me and put in the papers. And tried to make me out to be some thug who was irredeemable and should not aspire to, let alone become the top law enforcement officer in the state, right? Highlighting the fact that I, like many college kids, got drunk on campus one time and got arrested for public intoxication, right? And making that out to be something that was disqualifying, or that I had speeding tickets that I didn't pay that went to warrants in Texas. That's what happens, right? Or that there was a payment dispute that I had between myself and the company that was reported as a theft that was not, and that ultimately got dismissed. These negativities had a profound impact on me and my family, but the people of Nevada saw through it. And they elected me to be Attorney General, and they did not let the racism carry the day. The second, and I don't know if you knew this, but the morning after we got the results back that we won Attorney General, the first message I got on Facebook Messenger was a private message from someone saying to me, and I saved it as a screenshot in my phone to remind me of how it started. It's like that Facebook thing, how it started and how it's going. Here's how it started, Erica. The message said, "Great, a fucking nigger AG." That was the first message I got from someone after being declared the winner of the Attorney General race. How was it going when I ran for re-election? The lady running against me said, and you're going to have to beat this out too, I should be, and I quote, hanging from a fucking crane. And there was a lot in between, you know, a lot of the negativity that we received, right? And we still get that to this day, where I'm called out of my name. I get called everything but a child of God sometimes, Erica, you know, so it's not easy to do, but it's worth it, in the sense that I know that me sitting in the Attorney General's office is making a difference to everyday Nevadans, to my neighbors, to my friends, to my family, and we're making choices that are benefiting us all, and that will be the same as governor.
You know, and I get that. I get all of that. It's worth it. And, you know, we have to be above it. Michelle told us to go high and all of that. I'm
above it, Erica. I'm not saying I'm above it. Let's be clear. I get upset, and sometimes I engage in a respectful way, but it's not something that you get used to necessarily. I do think going through it has emboldened me to be that much more engaged with what I do, because I realize that this job is temporary, whether it's one term or two. You only got so much time to do as much as you can for as many people as possible on as many topics as possible. And that's why I do what I do during the time that I have to do it.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. What do you see yourself being able to accomplish as the governor?
Well, look, I'm going to invite you to have a conversation with me after we officially launch my gubernatorial campaign. We have announced I'm running. I'm focusing right now on ensuring that we get this legislation passed and signed. And at some point, we'll talk a little bit about some of that stuff. But stay tuned. There's a lot to be done, obviously, in the fields of housing, education, the economy, human dignity, understanding the importance of everybody in the Nevada family and respecting them as they aspire to take care of themselves and their families. And there will be a lot more that I say about that in the months to come.
Okay. And to be clear, for folks who may not know, that this election will take place in November of 2026.
That's right.
So there's still quite a bit of time for folks to get to know you and for us to dig deeper into the things that you want to see happen over your tenure.
Sticky Note Conversations with Erica Washington.
Hey y'all, I'm Erica Washington, the host, creator, and executive producer of Sticky Note Conversation. My life, my mind, is always running way too fast. So I jot down thoughts, questions about life, wish lists, goals, all on sticky notes. One sticky note was this podcast. Over the course of my journalism and social justice journey, I've met some really amazing people, but I hated that I couldn't talk longer and really dive into their lived experiences, their views of the world, and their dreams for the future. Sticky Note Conversations is for anyone who enjoys a really good conversation.
Sticky Note Conversations with Erica Washington.
Let's talk a little bit about this legislative session. You are obviously no stranger to the legislative session, being a senator and then our Senate Majority Leader, and working specifically with Make It Work on bills, including paid sick days that we were able to pass, which is great. And it's back around again because we're always trying to make it better. And there's actually a paid family leave bill now that we've engaged in to bring paid family leave to Nevada. That is something that we're hoping to convince the powers that be that it's both needed and wanted by the majority, the entire state. You know, no one doesn't want to have paid family leave. But what policies are the AG's office engaging in?
You know, several. We have, I think, 16 or 17 bills are running. And some are less sexy than others, to be sure. But the ones that have caught the headlines and will catch the headlines, including one that I have tomorrow morning, and I'll circle back to this, is on social media, youth online protection for social media companies. But one in particular that reminds me of the work that you and I did on paid sick leave back in 2015.
It was 17.
2017.
And 19.
You know, it's interesting because I'm reminded of that struggle. It reminds me of a bill I'm pursuing right now. I'm pursuing a bill, Assembly Bill 44. It deals with price fixing, not price gouging. There's a difference. Price gouging occurs during emergencies and people run up prices because they're taking advantage of an emergency. Price fixing is where people use illegal or unlawful practices to artificially increase prices that are in a way that is more than simple supply and demand, using tricks and fraud and deceit to do these type of things. And so I testified on this bill about 2 weeks ago in the Assembly Commerce Committee, and it was interesting to me to see the opposition that lined up. We did get some support come in. One entity got to support it. We didn't ask a lot of folks to show up. We just want to come and talk to the legislature about it. But almost every entity that opposed AB 44, Erica, would it surprise you to know that they opposed paid sick leave? And
I know. It's that same gang of folks.
You know, it's interesting.
Every time I see them.
I have worked since 2013 in good faith to work with industry groups on every bill that I have sponsored, invite them to the table, have working groups, ask for suggestions, talked about how helping the consumer or helping employees does not mutually exclude helping business. And it's interesting because when I tried to raise the minimum wage, that same group of folks, most of them, came and opposed it. When we tried to create paid sick leave, they came and opposed it. Speaking of price gouging, last session, I ran a bill that said you should not be able to price gouge during a state of emergency. They opposed it. And this time they opposed me trying to say that you should not be able to, here's what the law says, what the bill says, that you should not be able to fraudulently engage in a practice that artificially manipulates the price of essential goods and services in a way that is not normal supply and demand. That's what the law says, right? You can still raise your prices, but you can't fraudulently or deceitfully do so under the bill. And consumers understand that. I just did a video this morning about the bill, and I talked about the fact that you go to the grocery store and stuff was more expensive this week than it was last week. And sometimes it's supply and demand. Other times it's because people are cheating and corporations are figuring out ways to increase prices. And so that's a very important bill of mine that I think your viewers and listeners would want to know about. I suggest that they engage in that. I commend the bill to them, Senate Bill 44. A bill I'm testifying on tomorrow, Senate Bill 63, is the one that deals with youth online safety. And particularly to protect our youth from predators, from the predation that takes place when these folks slide into the DMs of our young folks and
being nasty.
Exactly. And do bad things. And we're focusing on protecting our youth in that regard, but also the mental health of our youth. I have a lawsuit, in fact, right now against 5 social media companies because of their impacts on social media and the effects of the algorithms that they use that addict these kids and ultimately have negative consequences. That's a bill that I think folks would find important. But we also have some bills that are working on trying to criminalize artificially, we call it CSAM, child sexual assault, sexual abuse material. We want to outlaw that type of material that is produced by artificial intelligence. And so we're going to be working with Nicole Canizaro, who has a bill in that regard. We're going to support her bill and try to help our youth in that regard as well, and a few other things as well.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
But to think about AI being used to create child pornography.
Yep. And that's what's happening. I mean, so it's not just taking a child's face and putting it on another body. It is sometimes creating a child that is not a real child, but it is created by artificial intelligence. How is a cop to know, looking at a picture, is this a real kid or is this somebody that was created by artificial intelligence? And we find that the crime is still existing in the sense that it leads to other folks being abused. It perpetuates problems. And so we're trying to outlaw that as well. Mm-hmm. And I think the bill hearing on that is Wednesday as well. I think that is a Senate bill. Let me tell you what it is. So in case your folks want to go back and check in on that, it's Senate Bill 263. And that's Nicole Canizaro's bill. And she uses child pornography as a phraseology, which, as you just did, most folks recognize CSAM as child pornography, but the most recent term being utilized in the industry now is CSAM, child sexual abuse material.
Does the Attorney General's office deal with sex trafficking?
We do. Actually, we have an ombudsman in my office that works on sex trafficking. We do stings in that area where I have investigators in my office who pose as children online, engaging with individuals who think they're children, trying to lure them, and we end up arresting folks for that kind of stuff. Absolutely. It's perverse reality, to be sure.
There is a bill. It is AB 328, which is an assembly bill to establish a commission on racial equity and social justice. They're calling it a reparations. They're calling it a reparations bill. And they want to do a study on reparations in the state of Nevada. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that or heard about it, but wanted to get your thoughts on what you think could become of a reparations study for Nevada.
Look, I've heard of it. I think Ruben Da Silva is the one running the bill, and
yes.
I've heard of it, and I'm tracking it and going to reserve judgment on, what the potential outcome from that will be by following the development in that particular bill. Okay. And before we go, I just would love to ask you about democracy. It's a question that I ask everyone. How do you define democracy, and do you think we currently have it? Interesting. Listen, I think democracy is a government for the people, by the people, that has a majority rule component, but protects the minority, right? And not only protects, but in my estimation, respects and recognizes the dignity of, frankly, not just the minority, but everybody in this country. And so I view it as a part of my job as Attorney General to defend the Constitution in a way that preserves our democratic republic that we have. And look, yes, we still have it. I do believe we have it, Erica. Is it being strained? Yes. Is it under fire? Yes. Is it being tested heavily? Absolutely. But it's like I said earlier, the rule of law still prevails, irrespective of who president is. And that's the reason why when he breaks the law, we sue. And that's the reason why when we sue, we've been winning in the lower level courts. To be sure, it might get to the Supreme Court, and it's not lost on me that it is a conservative majority of 6-3, with 3 of those conservative justices being appointed by Trump. But I remain confident in our institutions, including the courts, even if they disappoint me sometimes, to be sure, right? I don't always agree with what comes out of the Supreme Court. But as an example, I heard today that Chief Justice Roberts responded specifically to statements that the Trump administration has been making about trying to impeach a judge that tried to stop, and issued an order to stop the federal government from deporting individuals under an Alien Invasion Act. My phraseology may be off a little bit. That dates back to 1790s. And Justice Roberts said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing this, impeachment is not the answer. There's an appellate process for these types of things, and that's what we should undertake. That, to me, gives me some level of confidence that certainly at the Supreme Court level, or some would say even at the Supreme Court level, these justices recognize that the rule of law still has to prevail, that extreme measures like impeaching a judge because you disagree with his or her opinion is not the approach to take, is not what our Constitution contemplates. Does that mean that impeachment papers won't be brought up? The answer is no. In fact, they have been brought up. A congressman in Texas has filed impeachment papers against that judge. Let's see if it goes anywhere in the House. But at the end of the day, statements like that from Chief Justice Roberts give me some level of confidence that our democracy remains and will remain.
And the final question that I ask everyone, what is your version of the American dream?
I'm living it, frankly. It's interesting. I come from a neighborhood that didn't have a lot. I didn't have a lot. I wasn't expected to get out of it. Some of my friends are in jail. Some are dead. Some were, undiagnosed schizophrenics that ultimately went on to do some horrendous things, right? I mean, I know what living in poverty looks like. And here I am on the backside of 5 degrees, having received support at times in my life when I needed it. From the federal government, for example. Talk about the Department of Education. I went to Project Upward Bound, a national TRIO program for poor kids like me who didn't have otherwise have opportunities to prepare themselves to matriculate into college. Thank goodness for that, right? I had a baby in college and had to get on welfare. And thank goodness that it was there because it helped me. And now I got 3 sons and a nephew who are active social agents in society who are contributing members. This is the American dream. When I started off by telling you that I'm blessed, God is good to me, I mean that. And I believe that the story of my life and now the next generation of forwards as they pursue their lives is an indication of what the American dream can look like, even if it's only my version of the American dream.
Well, I want to thank you. And I knew this would be a good conversation, but to have such a great conversation with you and as 2 people who both have been on food stamps, 2 people who've both been on Medicaid and WIC as well, and Upward Bound. I am just grateful to have someone who has had all those experiences, because those experiences matter just as much as your degrees do when it comes to how we advocate for and represent people who are still in those situations and are looking for their bright star of what's next for them. So I appreciate you being transparent and open and talking about your past, because it is certainly nothing to be ashamed of. And it's something that has helped to get you where you are. And so with all gratitude, I am thankful for your time, Mr. Attorney General. And I look forward to chatting again, because I have more questions. I really want to talk about the Democratic Party, and I really want to know what we do about it. So we can talk about that next time, though. But thank you so much, AG.
Hey, sis. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
It's been wonderful. And this is Sticky Note Conversations, y'all. I will see y'all next week.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erica Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erica Washington. With editing by Black Gypsy LLC and Simone Endres. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy. And a special thank you to Grove GT Teague and Eno Savad, who made our new theme song, Way Below Acceptable.
This call is from a North Carolina correctional facility.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
My name is Marcus Ross Lorenzo Alston. I've been incarcerated since October of 2016.
Do you remember that moment of finding out that he was going to prison?
Yeah, I was in shock. Put it like this. It would be hard for me to see Marcus doing what they accused him of.
I've just been tortured my whole life. I have lived my life trying to be the opposite of all of the negative stuff that people have done to me or portrayed to me.
Why don't more people know or care about this? You don't even have to look. You just have to not look away.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
I don't think that the prison system is set up to reform. I think it's set up for punitive. In my mind, I believe that those systems are set up to keep those people there, not to reform them and to let them go.
All of it was just a money scheme.
Catch Season 2 of American Dreams wherever you get your podcasts.